It's March 3rd, and I have both a legal and an illegal death with anniversaries today that I'm going to go into at greater length. There's some other really sad cases where I don't have a whole lot of information. Three illegal deaths. One was in Chicago, uh, February 9th, February 29th of 1916. Dr. Nels Melling was summoned to the home of a 43-year-old homemaker named Augusta. And the next day, he sent her to Norwegian Deaconess Hospital there in Chicago. And while she was there, she made a deathbed statement that she was suffering the effects of abortion perpetrated by Dr. James R. Struble at his office. On March 3rd, she died from a massive infection. Struble was indicted by a grand jury, but for some reason the case never went to trial. And he was only free because 2 years earlier, when he'd been implicated in the death of a 24-year-old named Frances, that case hadn't gone to trial either. Um, and I'm not quite sure why Chicago um, pushed really hard against some fatal abortionists and not so much against others. But Augusta's death was really typical for Chicago at the time. A doctor did it and got away with it. Now, in Pittsburgh in 1918, most of my Pittsburgh deaths I stumbled across um, some records from the coroner's archives online. Can't even remember how I found them. It was just a list of deaths, and I found some abortion deaths, and I went to Allegheny County and actually got the original documents, and I wish I'd made copies of them. Maybe I'll go back sometime now that it's more the digital camera age and get images of them. But Pittsburgh was a very different world from Chicago. The self-induced abortions were a lot more common there, and I'm not sure why. And the methods were similar. The women in the Pittsburgh area tended to use slippery elm sticks, which was a known abortion technique for self-induced abortions, that apparently women were talking about them and telling each other about them. So um, on February 16th of 1918, a 26-year-old homemaker named Mary was very unwell after dinner, very unstable on her feet. Her husband asked her what was wrong. She said she didn't know. He helped her to bed and sent for Dr. Zabarenko, who examined her and prescribed some medicine. And next day he came back and diagnosed her with inflammation of the uterus, and he told Mary's husband to put an ice pack on her abdomen. On Thursday, the 21st, her condition had gotten worse, and her husband called Dr. Zabarenko, who took one look at her, called an ambulance, and sent her to Southside Hospital, where she was admitted for incomplete abortion and pelvic peritonitis due to self-induced abortion at home 2 weeks ago. So after her death, which was at about 2 in the morning on Saturday, March 6th, a doctor jotted a note to the coroner on a prescription pad saying that Mary had made a deathbed statement saying that she had inserted a stick of wood into the uterus to bring on menstruation, feeling she was pregnant. From this, she developed aseptic peritonitis and subsequently a septic pneumonia, from which she died. So this is another case of the sisterhood leading each other to death. Really don't understand why they do that. But maybe that's why I'm not pro-choice, because I don't understand why I'd be hurt do this dangerous thing instead of having another baby. I mean, she was married. I have no idea. And we moved 10 years later in Chicago. This was a 21-year-old woman named Vivian. She died in Chicago's Lakeside Hospital on March 3rd of 1928 from an infection. Um, Doctors attributed to a criminal abortion, but she absolutely refused to name an abortionist. And then, like I've said before, that was a really common thing where women would protect the person who killed them. The abortion itself, for some reason, seems to be more important than anybody's life. And, I think that there may be some women who, they're out there and it's this militant, I would rather die than have this baby live. But I think that that's not the norm. I think that most women, well, evidence is that most women, I'm going to cover the 1955 Planned Parenthood Conference on Abortion at some point. And it's been shown that if women are assured that they'll have support, that they'll get help, that they're not going to be abandoned, um, it's very rare that they persist in the idea of getting an abortion. Um, so this idea that, they seek out abortionists because the people around them steer them that way. So.